Hey everybody, and thanks for checking out this tutorial on how I edited the mussels image that I posted in Photoshop and Lightroom. Thanks for all the likes and feedback. Let's jump right in. So here is the straight out of camera image. As you can see, not that impressive, but we will get it to where it looks good. So the first thing I did was fix the angle, kind of skewed the angle a little bit because I didn't get it perfect in camera. I'm just using the vertical lines here with the vertical of the board slats to kind of get it where I want it. Alright, and next up we have white balance. Now for this and for most shoots, I actually use a color checker passport, and so for this one I created a custom color profile, which I'll select. If you didn't have this, it's no big deal. You can kind of get it close enough by eye. So I selected my custom color profile, and next up I'm going to change my white balance to 5900. My keyboard doesn't like me for some reason today. So 5900 on the temp, and on the tint we're going to go plus 22. Next up, exposure. I actually underexposed this, and you're probably thinking that's odd. It already looks a bit underexposed, but it'll make sense here in a few minutes. So I did it about 0.40 to half a stop underexposed. Contrast I left alone. Next up, highlights. We did a negative 33 on the highlights. Let's type that in. Shadows I bumped up to about a 43. Whites, negative 14. Blacks, a negative 16. Really kind of help with that contrast. Clarity, I did a bump of 12. Raise that up a little bit. Vibrance, quite a bit of vibrance at 36. And I actually took the saturation down to a negative 10. I find that kind of helps to balance out the colors. If you go through and crank up the vibrance and the saturation, it kind of gets a little bit cartoony looking. So that's kind of what I do. Tone curve, I did add a bit of tone curve. I know some of you were asking about the kind of color, and what I did was put a little bit of blue in the shadow and a little bit of yellow in the highlight. That very classic cinematic, you know, blues in the shadows, yellows, oranges in the highlights type of look. I didn't do anything with HSL or split toning. Under detail, so for sharpening, I did a plus 71. And then radius 1, detail I took down to a 17. And masking. Now masking's pretty important. So now a lot of times people will come in here and they'll just play with the amount of sharpening. If you hold, I think it's the Alt or Option key in a Mac, you hold down Alt, and you click and drag, you'll see you get this white screen. Well, just like Photoshop, white reveals, black conceals. The white areas is where it's being sharpened, and the black is not. So we can kind of play around with this to selectively choose where our image is going to be sharpened. So for this image, I believe I did a 36 in the masking, which looks like that. Luminance noise reduction, I didn't do any of that. I did enable profile corrections and remove chromatic aberrations, always do. Vignette, I did a negative 25. And then I also pulled up my highlights all the way. And the reason why that's good is if there's any highlight area, so like here, or highlights in the grain, the vignette won't affect the highlight areas. And that's kind of good because it helps to blend that vignette a little bit more. Alright, next up, making it look pretty. So under our radial filter, I went through and reset everything by double-clicking Effect. And I'm going to pull a radial filter from about the center of the pan, holding Shift. I'm going to pull out until it's about the size I need, which looks about right there. I'm going to move it into position. Could probably be a touch bigger. Sorry, my phone was beeping at me over there. And what I did for these adjustments on the mussels is I increased the temperature to about 15. Tint I left alone, and this is kind of where the magic happens. I bumped up the exposure to 2.36. Contrast I left alone. Highlights I pulled down to a -29. Saturation I bumped up to a 52. And then the other thing is feather. When it's at 100% feather, it really blends from this edge inward. And when you come and you pull feather all the way, it creates a very hard edge. So I don't want a hard edge, but I do want to feather that just a little bit. And in this case, I chose a feather of 25. That looks good. And that's it for the mussels. Now for the basil, I created a new radial filter. And again, holding shift, I just kind of want to encompass all of the basil. And for this one, I did a temperature increase. No, sorry, I did not do a temperature increase. I went right to exposure and went to 0.78. So almost over 3/4 of a stop. And contrast I increased to 20. Shadows I bumped up to 24 to open those shadows up a little bit. Saturation, I did a lot of saturation here, 59. I really wanted that green to pop. And I actually added a little sharpening here to 38, just to make sure that our elements were nice and sharp. And that is it. Oh, I apologize. One more thing. Again, with our feather, it was at 100% here. We reduced the feather down to about 40 on that. That looks good. And there we go. That is sort of the trick behind this Mysitc lighting effect that you see all the time, and this very rustic type of look. I hope that helps, and thanks again for all the likes and comments.